Karen handed Theo his favorite smoothie with a warm smile. Then he collapsed minutes later. Accused of poisoning him, she sat in court, shaking, as whispers of betrayal filled the room. But just when the verdict seemed inevitable, Theo raised a trembling hand and pointed. "He's the one who hurt me." Gasps echoed, eyes turned, and in that instant, the real darkness hiding in plain sight began to unravel. What secret had the family ignored all along? Want to know what happened? Watch till the end and don't miss this story full of emotions and shocking twists. Tell us which city you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories like this. Karen opened her eyes just as the first rays of dawn illuminated Mr. Anderson's quiet suburban home. Rising early was her routine, a routine she cherished. She softly padded down the hallway to the cozy kitchen, humming gently as she prepared breakfast. It wasn't just a job for Karen, this was her second home. Caring for 8-year-old Theo was a duty of love that healed her own heart. Theo was more than the child she watched. He reminded her deeply of the younger brother she'd lost many years ago. His laughter, curiosity, and endless energy brought warmth into her life, filling a gap that had long remained empty. Each morning, Karen helped him get ready for school, packed his lunch, and patiently walked him through his spelling homework, offering encouragement whenever he stumbled. Mr. Anderson, busy and often overwhelmed with work, always paused to express his gratitude to Karen. After losing his wife, he struggled to balance fatherhood and his career, and he knew how vital Karen had become in Theo's life. Their bond brought him comfort, knowing his son was in gentle and caring hands. But today was a little different. Karen felt unease creeping into her morning routine. A shadow had fallen over the house with the arrival of Brian, Theo's 16-year-old cousin. On the surface, Ryan seemed like any typical teenager, popular, charismatic, and full of youthful bravado. But beneath his easy smiles, Karen noticed something darker. She caught glances filled with resentment and subtle sneers that vanished quickly whenever Mr. Anderson entered the room. Karen tried to dismiss her discomfort. Perhaps it was just teenage moodiness after all, yet she couldn't shake the feeling. Ryan had only been there 2 days, but she already sensed trouble brewing under the surface. "Hey, Karen, can we make smoothies later?" Theo called cheerfully from the breakfast table, breaking her train of thought. His eager eyes sparkled with excitement. She smiled warmly, her worries briefly melting away. "Of course, sweetie, your favorite mango and banana, right?" "Yes," he giggled, turning back to his cereal. Karen glanced toward the doorway, noticing Ryan leaning silently against the frame, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met for a moment, and a chill traveled down her spine. He nodded casually, masking whatever thoughts lay behind his distant gaze. She busied herself at the sink, quietly wondering if she should mention her unease to Mr. Anderson. But how could she voice such vague suspicions? He already carried so much responsibility, she thought, and the last thing she wanted was to burden him further. As Theo rushed out the door to catch the school bus, Karen watched him through the window, smiling softly as he waved enthusiastically from the curb. Yet as she turned back toward the kitchen, the sight of Ryan's cold stare lingered in her mind. Something felt wrong, but Karen didn't yet know what. She only hoped it would pass, unaware that her intuition was warning her of the tragedy that would soon unfold. Later that day, the house settled into its usual weekend rhythm. Karen had just returned from the market, carrying bags of fresh fruit and vegetables, when Theo bounded into the kitchen. "Smoothie time now?" he asked, practically bouncing with excitement. Karen laughed and ruffled his hair. "You've been thinking about it all day, haven't you?" He grinned. "I even dreamed about mangoes last night." She began unpacking the ingredients onto the counter: perfectly ripe mangoes, sweet bananas, and a small bottle of coconut milk. As she peeled the fruit, she noticed Ryan enter the room. He didn't say anything, just watched quietly from a distance, arms folded as always. Karen felt that prickle of unease again. Ryan's gaze wasn't on her this time, it was fixed on Theo. There was something intense in his eyes, something calculating. She kept her tone light, hiding her discomfort. "Would you like one too, Ryan?" she offered, without turning. "No thanks," he replied flatly, then lingered a moment longer before heading back upstairs. Karen exhaled softly, shaking off the feeling. Maybe she was just reading into things. Teenagers were moody. It didn't mean anything. She turned back to Theo and smiled. "All right, Smoothie King, let's get blending." She placed the fruit into the blender, added the coconut milk, and reached for a handful of ice. Just then, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was Mr. Anderson calling from the pharmacy. "Hi, Karen. Just a quick reminder. Don't forget to give Theo his allergy meds tonight. He had a little flare-up this morning." "Of course," she replied. "Thanks for the heads up." She stepped into the hallway to finish the short call, leaving the blender unattended for less than a minute. The door to the living room creaked softly behind her. She didn't hear footsteps, but something shifted in the air, something she couldn't quite name. When she returned, everything looked the same. The smoothie was still in the blender, untouched, and Theo was doodling happily at the kitchen table. She poured the drink into his favorite glass and handed it to him. "Enjoy, champ." Theo took a big sip, giving her a goofy mango mustache smile. Karen laughed, relieved to see his happiness unchanged. But less than 5 minutes later, that joy dissolved into something terrifying. Theo's expression went blank. He dropped his marker. His small hands clutched his stomach as he let out a low groan. Karen's smile vanished. "Theo, what's wrong?" He stumbled from his chair, face pale and damp with sweat. His knees buckled. Karen ran to catch him before he hit the floor, heart thudding wildly. "Somebody call 911, she screamed, and in that single moment, everything she thought she knew collapsed. Sirens echoed down the quiet suburban street as the ambulance pulled into the driveway. Paramedics rushed in, finding Karen on the floor, holding Theo tightly, whispering his name again and again, as if it might anchor him to consciousness. "He just collapsed," she stammered as they worked swiftly. "He was fine. He was laughing, drinking his smoothie, and then he just—" They nodded professionally, already checking vitals and administering oxygen. One of them radioed ahead to the hospital, reporting signs of poisoning. Poisoning. The word didn't register with Karen at first. It felt surreal, like a mistake or a bad dream. She climbed into the back of the ambulance with Theo, barely hearing the questions they asked along the way. Her mind was racing, playing and replaying every second of the afternoon. The smoothie, the brief moment she left the kitchen. Could it have been an allergic reaction? But nothing in the drink had ever hurt him before. Her hands shook as she tried to make sense of it. At the hospital, doctors acted quickly, ordering toxicology screens and stabilizing Theo. Nurses ushered Karen to a small waiting area where Mr. Anderson arrived moments later, breathless and terrified. His eyes searched her face for answers. "What happened?" he demanded. "I don't know," she whispered, voice trembling. "He drank the smoothie, and then he just collapsed. I swear I didn't put anything in it. I used the same fruit I always do." He didn't respond immediately. His jaw clenched, and she could see the confusion and panic boiling beneath his surface. Then a nurse appeared and pulled him aside to explain what the doctors had found. High doses of antidepressants in Theo's bloodstream. Karen heard the words but couldn't believe them. Antidepressants in a child's smoothie. How? Police officers arrived not long after. Standard procedure, they said. A possible poisoning of a minor. They were calm, but Karen felt their eyes on her like a weight. One of them asked if anyone else had handled the food. "No," she said instinctively, then hesitated. I did leave the kitchen for a minute, just one, to take a call." The officer nodded and jotted something in his notebook. Back at the house, detectives reviewed security footage. The kitchen. Camera showed only Karen preparing the smoothie, placing the lid on the blender, and then walking out of frame. No one else appeared to enter. No one. That night, as Theo remained unconscious and sedated in the ICU, Karen sat alone in a small, windowless interview room. Across the table, a detective leaned in and asked gently, "Karen, is there anything you want to tell us?" Karen blinked at the detective's question, her throat suddenly dry. "Tell you?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, I've told you everything I know. I made the smoothie, stepped away for a phone call, and when I came back, nothing looked out of place." The detective studied her silently for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "You understand why this is serious," he said calmly. "Theo could have died." The weight of that truth pressed down on her chest like a stone. "I would never hurt him," she said, the words bursting out of her like a prayer. "He's like family to me. I love that boy." Another officer entered the room and handed over a manila folder. The detective opened it, flipping through its contents. The toxicology confirmed it was a strong dosage of prescription antidepressants, the same kind his father keeps in the upstairs medicine cabinet. "You don't have access to that, do you?" Karen froze. "Of course not. That cabinet stayed locked. Mr. Anderson had mentioned it once, just in passing, after Theo had tried to climb the bathroom counter months ago." "No," she said quietly. "I wouldn't even know where he keeps the key." The detective nodded, slowly. "And you were alone in the kitchen. No one else on the footage. No fingerprints but yours on the blender." Karen's stomach turned. She could see it now, the shape of the case they were building, the timeline, the video, the medication. She was being framed by circumstance. They released her later that evening, but only after she promised to remain available for further questioning. Back home, the silence was suffocating. Mr. Anderson didn't speak much. He paced the hallway like a man adrift in a fog, checking his phone, waiting for updates from the hospital. Karen tried to approach him once, but he pulled away, murmuring something about needing time. The next morning, the front page of the local paper carried her name. "Nanny investigated in child poisoning case." Her stomach churned as she read the headlines. Neighbors who once waved now stared through their blinds. A friend from church texted her, "I hope this isn't true, Karen." That was all. Later that afternoon, 2 officers arrived at the house. One held a small box. The other had a warrant. "Karen Hayes," the taller one said, "you're under arrest for the suspected poisoning of Theo Anderson." And just like that, her world shattered. Handcuffs clicked tightly around Karen's wrists as the officers led her to the squad car. The neighbors gathered in clumps along the sidewalk, whispering, staring, some even filming with their phones. The shame was unbearable. She kept her head down, eyes fixed on the ground, not daring to look at Mr. Anderson, who stood frozen on the porch, his face blank and unreadable. At the station, the booking process moved slowly. Fingerprints, mugshots, a stiff orange jumpsuit, her belongings sealed in a plastic bag. Karen found herself in a holding cell with 3 other women who didn't ask questions. The cold metal bench beneath her felt like a punishment in itself, but it was nothing compared to the heaviness inside her chest. She lay awake all night, curled on her side, replaying everything, every moment in that kitchen, every second Theo drank from that glass. The boy she'd bathed, read to, laughed with, now fighting for his life. And everyone believed she had done it. She thought of her younger brother Jamie, the soft-hearted boy who used to follow her around with a toy guitar. He had passed away at 13 after a long illness. It had broken her, and she had spent years feeling like she hadn't protected him enough. That same pain had returned the moment Theo collapsed in her arms. The panic, the helplessness. Only now the world saw her not as a grieving sister or loving caregiver, but as a threat. The next morning, a public defender met with her in a drab interview room. He was polite but overwhelmed, juggling a dozen other cases. "They've got motive and circumstantial evidence," he said. "No prior record helps. But this is serious, Karen." "I didn't do it," she said firmly, gripping the edge of the table. "I didn't poison Theo." He nodded but said little else. A preliminary hearing was scheduled and Karen was escorted to court in shackles. As she entered the courtroom, she saw familiar faces. People from the neighborhood, parents, of Theo's classmates. None of them met her eyes. Mr. Anderson sat beside his attorney, pale and rigid, and Ryan, sitting silently behind him, watched everything unfold with an expression Karen couldn't read. When the prosecutor laid out the timeline, security footage, medication match, no other suspects, murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Karen sat motionless. She wanted to scream, to shake someone and beg them to believe her, but she stayed silent. And in that silence, the weight of doubt settled on her shoulders like a storm cloud refusing to break. The hearing adjourned with the judge denying bail. Karen was led back to her cell, wrists sore from the cuffs, heart heavier than ever. The courtroom's murmur still echoed in her ears. She could hear the subtle shift in breath when the prosecutor mentioned Theo's condition, the hushed disbelief when the video was shown, and the absence of any real defense. There had been no outburst, no witness in her favor, just a quiet unraveling of the life she had built around love and trust. Back in jail, the fluorescent lights hummed ceaselessly overhead. She stared at the wall across from her bunk, counting cracks to pass the time. Every few hours, a guard would walk by, but no one spoke to her. Days blurred into one another, meals came and went untouched, and each night Karen lay awake wondering if Theo had opened his eyes, or if he ever would again. Then, late on a Wednesday afternoon, something changed. One of the guards approached her cell. "You've got a visitor," he muttered. Karen followed him to the visitation room where, to her surprise, it wasn't a lawyer or police officer waiting, it was Mr. Anderson. He looked exhausted, paler than she remembered. His suit was wrinkled, and he carried himself like someone who hadn't slept in days. For a long moment, they just stared at each other through the glass. Finally, he picked up the phone. "I don't know what to believe," he said, his voice cracking, "but I just came from the hospital. Theo's stable now, and he's talking." Karen's breath caught. "He asked where you were," Mr. Anderson continued. "He kept saying you didn't hurt him, that he saw something, someone." Karen's pulse quickened. "I didn't press him," he added. "He's still weak. But the nurse said he's been mumbling about Ryan, about seeing him near the blender when you were on the phone." The glass between them felt thinner now, like it might disappear with just a breath. Mr. Anderson leaned closer. "Karen, if there's even a chance Ryan had something to do with this, I need to know. I need to protect my son. Can you think of anything? Anything at all you may have missed?" She thought back. The silence in the kitchen, the feeling that something had shifted in her absence, the cold stare Ryan had given her that morning. "There was a moment," she whispered. "Just a moment. But yes, I think he was there." Hope returned, fragile and flickering, but alive. Mr. Anderson left the jail with a new urgency in his step. Theo's fragmented memory had changed everything. The quiet image of Ryan, standing near the blender while Karen was away, haunted his thoughts. He made a call to the detective handling the case and urged them to revisit Ryan's room, this time with fresh eyes. Detectives returned to the Anderson home later that afternoon. They searched the guest room thoroughly, removing drawers, checking beneath furniture, and opening every bag and pocket. Hidden in the toe of a rolled-up sock, they found it, a small, partially used bottle of antidepressants. The label was ripped, but the pills inside matched the exact type found in Theo's toxicology report. That alone wasn't enough. They needed more. So they took Ryan's phone. A digital forensic expert began combing through it, looking for deleted messages, photos, anything. Among the recovered files, they found screenshots of old conversations and a few messages to friends that raised red flags. One, dated 3 days before the incident, read, "If I have to hear about how perfect Theo is one more time, I swear." Another simply said, "Let's see how golden he looks after this weekend." Still, Ryan denied everything. When questioned by detectives, he remained eerily calm. He said the pills were his father's, that he had taken them by mistake, and that he never touched the blender. His tone was cold, calculated, and empty of remorse. Legally, it wasn't a confession, but it was enough to raise serious doubt about Karen's guilt. Karen's attorney filed a motion to present this new evidence in court. The judge, hesitant but curious, agreed. An emergency hearing was scheduled for the following morning. Inside her cell, Karen could feel something shifting. The tension in the air had changed. The guards weren't as curt. Her lawyer had a new urgency in his voice. Still, she kept her heart guarded. Too many hopes had been dashed already. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Mr. Anderson sat near the front, wringing his hands. Ryan entered quietly, his eyes low. Karen sat tall in her seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. And then, just before the session began, the doors opened. Theo was wheeled into the courtroom, pale but awake, ready to speak. The moment everyone had been waiting for was seconds away. The air inside the courtroom grew heavy as Theo was wheeled forward, his small frame draped in a soft blue blanket. He looked thinner than before, paler too, but his eyes held a quiet determination that silenced the room more powerfully than the judge's gavel ever could. Karen turned in her seat, breath caught in her chest. She hadn't seen him since that awful day. Just the sight of him sitting upright, alive, was enough to bring tears to her eyes. She swallowed hard and looked to Mr. Anderson, whose hands trembled slightly as he rested them on his son's shoulders. The judge leaned forward gently. "Theo, are you well enough to speak with us today?" The boy nodded, his voice quiet but clear. "Yes, Your Honor." A collective stillness fell. Every eye locked onto him. The bailiff stepped forward, microphone adjusted, and the court reporter poised her fingers above the keys. The prosecutor began carefully. "Theo, we're so glad you're feeling better. Can you tell us what you remember from the day you got sick?" Theo looked toward Karen first. Their eyes met. He offered a small, knowing smile, one that said more than words ever could. Then he turned his gaze to the center of the courtroom. "I was at the table," he said, his voice steady, "drawing while Karen made my smoothie. She left the room to take a phone call, and that's when I saw him." He lifted his hand, slowly, arm trembling just a little. Then he pointed directly at Ryan. "He's the one who hurt me." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ryan froze in place as if struck. For the first time, his mask cracked, his mouth opened, but no words came out. His face turned pale. Karen's hand shot up to her mouth, her vision blurred with tears. The judge looked to the prosecutor, then to the defense. Murmurs spread like wildfire through the room. Mr. Anderson stood in disbelief, staring at Ryan as if seeing him for the first time. Theo continued quietly but firmly. "I didn't say anything right away, because I wasn't sure what I saw. But when I got sick and they said it was poison, I remembered." The judge ordered Ryan to be taken into custody for further investigation. Officers approached, and for the first time, Ryan's shoulders sagged. He didn't resist. No more lies. No more pretending. Karen sat stunned as the judge turned to her and with solemn grace dismissed all charges. She was free, but more than that. She was believed, and in that moment, the truth didn't just set her free. It saved them all. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable day in court, yet its echoes lingered like ripples in a quiet lake. Karen stood once again in the Anderson kitchen, sunlight pouring through the windows, mangoes ripening on the counter. The house had regained its calm rhythm, though some shadows would take longer to lift. Theo sat at the table, coloring a spaceship with his usual concentration, pausing now and then to sip from a smoothie, this time made together under his watchful, curious eyes. He trusted her fully, but she understood that trust, once shaken, needed time to feel whole again. Mr. Anderson entered from the garden with a cup of coffee, watching them for a moment before speaking. "You know," he said gently, "I replayed it in my head 1,000 times. What if I had listened to you sooner? What if I hadn't doubted?" Karen gave him a small smile. "You were scared. Any parent would be." He nodded, eyes heavy with regret. "Still, you saved him. And I almost let them take you away for good." She placed a hand on his arm. "We're all healing." Ryan, now in a juvenile rehabilitation center, had written a letter to both his uncle and Theo. It was raw, filled with shame and remorse. Therapy had begun to uncover layers of resentment built over years of silent comparisons, pressure and isolation. Mr. Anderson had chosen to visit him weekly, hoping not only to support his nephew's rehabilitation, but to understand how he had missed so many warning signs. As for the neighborhood that once turned its back on Karen, apologies came slowly, some in person, others by letter. One neighbor left flowers on the porch with no note, just a small tag that read, "I was wrong." Karen had kept it in her drawer, not for revenge or validation, but as a reminder of how quickly people believe what they're told, especially when fear whispers louder than truth. She had been tested in every way. Her name dragged through headlines, her heart nearly broken, her freedom almost stolen, but what remained was stronger than any doubt. Her love for Theo hadn't wavered, and his belief in her, when it mattered most, had turned the tide. Now, each sunrise was a quiet victory. Each laugh from Theo, a healing balm. And though some scars stayed hidden, Karen carried them not as burdens, but as proof that the truth, when held with patience and courage, will always find its voice. Even in the darkest room, even through a child's whisper, it will rise, and it will be heard. If this story moved you or reminded you of the power of truth and kindness, we'd be honored to have you with us. Please consider subscribing to our channel for more real, emotional stories that touch the heart and celebrate the strength of everyday people. Your support means more than you know, and we'd love to have you as part of our growing family. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next story.